Prime Minister Takagi's statements are shocking and will really push the situation into an abyss as far as Japan is concerned. Don't play with fire, because you are talking about Japan getting involved militarily against China. Come on.
Let me start with Japan. The Japanese new Prime Minister Takagi has recently claimed Japan could face a survival crisis if a conflict over Taiwan happened. How do you interpret her remarks?
I think Prime Minister Takagi's statements are shocking and will really push the situation into an abyss as far as Japan is concerned.
China has responded very strongly, but many Western critics say China is overreacting. Do you think China is overreacting?
Do they want to wait for another bombing of Pearl Harbor by Japan? Do they really want to suffer the consequence of another surprise attack by Japan? Japan did this many times. So wake up those people who have any complacency. For example, they either don't know history or they never read the international treaties or the international agreements. And if they do not know all the mistakes and all the criminal intent of Prime Minister Takagi, then they do not qualify to even open up their mouth in this world, because they will mislead the world. They will lead to the repetition of another bombing of Pearl Harbor. That is the serious moment we are facing with.
How likely is Japan to get involved if the mainland moves towards reunification?
Wake up. Anyone in Japan, never indulge in that fantasy. It's a fantasy. It's not reality. How can Japan today imagine they can involve itself militarily against China? That will be the most serious crime you can ever think about. That is exactly what the Chinese government has been warning Japan. Don't play with fire, because you are talking about Japan getting involved militarily against China. Come on. Let me tell you, the unconditional surrender instrument of Japan has no time limit, and they will never be allowed to launch another war or getting involved militarily against China, because, never forget this, Japan is a surrendering country. China is a victor nation, and history has already made the verdict. This is not what Victor Gao said today. This was carved in stone back in 1945.
So what motivated the Japanese Prime Minister to make such remarks, and how do you see the current Japanese government position on this?
I think she violated several very important principles. First of all, Japan unconditionally surrendered to China back in 1945. And in the surrender instruments, Japan undertook several commitments, and she is in complete violation of the unconditional surrender conditions that Japan entered into with China back in 1945. Secondly, Japan constitution now specifically prohibits formation of a Japan military. Japan is only allowed to have self-defense forces, and there are specific provisions prohibiting dispatching the self-defense forces outside of Japan on combative missions. Therefore, Prime Minister Takagi is in violation of that constitutional provision. In that sense, she is a criminal under Japanese law. Now, the third very important thing is that Japan actually offered to normalize its diplomatic relations with China back in 1971. Japan specifically recognized and acknowledged that there is only one China, and Taiwan is part of China. So Japan has nothing to do as far as Taiwan is concerned, because Taiwan, being recognized by Japan ever since 1971 as being part of China, is completely an internal matter of China. Fourthly, there is another very important document, that is the United Nations Charter, which contains very specifically a clause about the enemy state. And Japan was an enemy state as far as China is concerned. And what Prime Minister Takagi did recently is tantamount to pushing for triggering that enemy state provision, which will enable to China to strike militarily at Japan without prior consultation with the Security Council of the United Nations. That means this Prime Minister Takagi is really changing the nature of the situation and pushing the situation in the direction of war. And this will really be a scourge in this part of the world. We need to do whatever we can to make sure that Prime Minister Takagi knows her mistakes and all the wrongdoings and apologize fully about this.
Is she trying to please the U.S.? What's the U.S. factor in this whole discussion?
I think the Americans are sophisticated enough to reach the conclusion that Japanese fascism should never be allowed to raise its dangerous head, because it will not only be a menace to China, it will be a menace to the American people. The American people will never forget Pearl Harbor. The American people will never forgive what the atrocities the Japanese imperialists were involved in. While now Japan and the United States are considering each other as allies, if you go to Japan and ask around, they want to become normalized by 2045, meaning they no longer want to have American soldiers stationed in Japan. Do you think the United States will really make that decision to withdraw all their troops stationed in Japan? No, they will not. Why? Because they don't trust the Japanese. Whatever Prime Minister Takagi did this time really reinforces this suspicion. If Japan, misguided, will turn against China as a victor nation, they can equally turn against the United States as another victor nation. And this is the danger we are faced with. We need to call on the whole world to put a complete stop onto Prime Minister Takagi.